Hello, I'm the podcast without fear, Luke.
I'm the Uncanny Ryan.
I am Kylie the Pudinger.
I am the superior Caitlin.
And I am the agitated Kyle.
And
we are most of the Nerddom Podcast.
Podcast.
Every Friday, some variation of this group gets together and talks about all things nerd.
The newest stuff in TV, movies, comics, video games, and more.
So join us in the Dome every Friday to hear all things nerd.
From a bunch of people who are probably a bit too into it.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be
the owner of a comic book store.
Trust me, true believer. Well, Jagger and me, we had a running contest to see who had the most comic books in the world.
Whatever, my escape was comic books.
Net profit to me, negative $59.
I love the comics because of the brightness displayed by the fellows who drew them. They remain with me always. And when comic books first came into being, it drew me to them.
Tales from the Comic Shop.
Hey, welcome to Tales from the Comic Shop, the show that takes you behind the counter. I'm your host, Joe. Today I'm joined by Roger and Eddie, and we have some very special guests also with us today. We have the co-creators of Thomas River, Doug Wagner, and Brian Stelfreeze. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Rocking it, dude.
Yeah, having a great day, man.
Awesome. Roger, Eddie, what are you guys up to?
Surviving.
I'm on COVID quarantine, so I've just been bored.
Ooh, that sounds boring. All right, well, we're going to jump into some news real quick. Mariko Tamaki has been announced as the new writer for Detective Comics, marking the first time in its 80-year history that a female is writing on either of the tentpole Bat books.
Either of them, huh? So both Detective and mainline Batman?
Yes, sir. It's quite a feather in her cap. It's kind of bizarre that it took this long for a woman to be named the writer of either of those books. But
yeah, that is a little long.
Yeah, especially when you consider it's both titles.
Yeah, 80 years. It's a minute.
Yeah, I just always assumed
that
that Devin Grayson had already written some detective issues or something like that.
That's possible. It's just not what the release that I saw said.
They might be considering someone as an ongoing long-term writer then.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Devin Grayson did Gotham Knights, which wasn't one of the. That wasn't Batman.
Wasn't
or
the tentpole series. That makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I just I knew she was banging around the Bat office when I first got there, so I just assumed that maybe she was in there doing some stuff.
Gotcha.
It's honestly hard to believe that it's been that nobody. I mean, you got Devin. I mean, there's been some great female writers.
Gail Simone.
I'm surprised
a ton of Batman stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm surprised Gail hasn't done anything on that yet.
She was on. I mean, Birds of Prey is obviously the one that jumps. Actually,
but that's the thing. She's been so successful in that universe. The fact that they haven't had her make that jump is really surprising.
Yeah, it is.
No,
it's a little
that
bizarre.
is.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Mariko Tamaki, I know Eddie had a book that he really liked that she did called, was it Spider-Man Venom?
Yeah, it was, I believe the story was called Double Trouble, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay.
It was kind of an all ages, almost slightly chibi kind of style story book. And the premise was really fantastic. If any of you haven't read it, I definitely recommend you guys go back and read it. The basic premise is that Venom wants to go onto an American Ninja style reality TV show and win, but they won't let him go on because he's Venom. So he figures out a way to switch bodies with Spider-Man so he can go on the show and win. And it's just hilarious. It's just really funny.
Nice. That does sound good. I will be checking that out. Other credits, she's done some Harley Quinn, looks like X-23, Supergirl, Tomb Raider, Lumberjanes, which is an excellent book. I don't know how many of you have gotten a chance to pick that up, but I recommend it. But yeah, so that's about going to do it for news for us this week. It's been a slow news week.
So, Doug, I heard that recently your apartment's just like an open house. Just anyone can walk on by, unlock the door, drop in. Is that when are we all invited?
I mean, I just moved into Salt Lake, and I guess that's a thing here. Like everybody gets a key to your apartment, so they can come in whenever they feel like it. I'm not from Utah, so I don't understand all the rules. But I guess that's
part of the hospitality program.
No. Obviously, the guy was just out of fry sauce, and he needed to borrow some, and so he stopped by to see if he had any.
And obviously, I don't have fry sauce because I'm not from Utah. So
he left in disappointment very quickly, and you let him down. You let a man down, Doug.
That's not abnormal.
And just in case anyone wants to visit Doug, his address is 522 Malcolm Lane.
And if any of you are traveling from out of state to Utah to get into Doug's place, just know that fry sauce is disgusting.
Oh, wrong. Hey, we're not going to get down that path because we're going to have an argument here.
I'm for it. I'm there for it.
Is that mayo and ketchup?
There's more. There's mayo, ketchup, a little bit of dill pickle juice, some garlic. It's more than just mayo, ketchup.
Stop. Just stop. I was thinking that it might be interesting because it has the word fry and sauce in it. But nah, you crashed it, man.
This is one of the few times in my life that my Utah really shows is when I defend fry sauce. That is definitely that's the most Utah thing about me, I think.
Yeah, this is the issue that is polarizing this country. Trust me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Important.
So hey, you guys got so your new project, Thomas River. You guys want to tell us a little bit about it? Why you're excited for this project? What you got going on?
Go first, Brian.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is we've done comics for just about every publisher, and we've tried like a bunch of different things, and we've just kind of decided to do our own thing, and we've done that through Image, but we wanted even more control because both Doug and I are kind of control freaks, and we just decided to go Kickstarter with this one so that we can kind of take it directly to the fans, kind of get the distributor, publisher, everybody out of the way, and it's actually been kind of a real learning experience, but just a ton of fun. I mean, it almost feels like I just got into the industry again. It's just really kind of a cool hangout, and the book itself is something Doug and I have wanted to do for a few years now, but it doesn't quite fit in standard comics, which is one of the reasons why we decided to go to Kickstarter. This is more of a spy espionage book, and it's about this guy who's like a world-renowned engineer, which gives him the ability to travel all over the world, but he uses that as a cover because he's like a CIA agent, and it's kind of like James Bond, John Wick, sort of full action stuff.
Now, that sounds pretty awesome. Can I ask you guys this? Is this the first Kickstarter that either of you have done?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys did this, but from a retailer standpoint, I always like to give this advice to people who are going to do a Kickstarter who maybe not have a lot of experience doing it. If you haven't done this, always add a retailer level, because I've got so many creator friends that want me to support them as a retailer for their Kickstarter. And I tell them, fine, but you got to put a level on there that's like maybe half a dozen copies of the same book, so I have inventory to put in my store. Doesn't do me any good as a retailer to have one copy of the book, a bookmark, a pin, and all that. So if you guys haven't done that already, when you do your next one, I definitely recommend that. Always put a retailer level, because if you do, I will always support it.
Sweet. Really appreciate it, man. Well, we're definitely going to be considering that. That's something that we're doing sort of separate from the Kickstarter. But yeah, definitely. We want to. I mean, Doug and I we try to be huge supporters of retailers, because retailers tend to be huge supporters of us. So Kickstarter was just kind of trying something different.
So how different is it when you're on like Kickstarter, when you're doing the marketing and the support for the book versus doing something that was published through, either Image where it's your own, or also compared to like Marvel or DC where it's obviously something you don't own?
It's, dude, like what we found out, we went in after reading article after article, help section after help section of how to run a Kickstarter, and still we didn't have a clue of what we were doing. you think it has something to do with the comic book industry, but it doesn't feel anything like the comic book industry. So what I would say is it's actually completely different. Like, it's 30 days of nonstop promoting. You got to take care of the people that are backing your product. So you're constantly responding to, trying to take care of the people that are taking care of you. So like you're constantly responding to emails and, Facebook messages and that kind of stuff. And it's just such a different animal because I'm sure Brian's going to chime in here. Usually like when you do a comic for one of the publishers, you send it in 6 months before it's going to hit the stands. And then you don't ever hear anything back ever.
Yeah. In fact, Doug and I were talking the other day, and one of the things that I remarked about was it was as if we were inventing the comic for the very first time. There was just like even though you can lean on the experience of others, and the Kickstarter community is really cool about sharing information, it really almost doesn't matter. So, and Doug and I tend to let our work speak for itself. We tend to be reclusive and not necessarily engaging online. Very engaging if you meet us at a convention, but we don't do like a lot of the social media stuff. And Kickstarter is all about that, So you really have to kind of put yourself out there. So it was very, very different, and it was kind of cool at the same time. So it was like doing comics with with Image and doing comics with Marvel and DC. You really almost have no connection with the fans whatsoever during the actual publishing part of the comic. But Kickstarter was just completely different.
Yeah, it's a whole other challenge. That's cool.
Yeah. Now, as someone who has run 3 successful Kickstarters,
woo!
Someone, when I did my very first one, gave me the best piece of advice, and I did it on all 3 of my Kickstarters. And if any other creators are out there wanting to get their book out and are thinking about doing Kickstarter, this is the best piece of advice I ever got. Every level that you do needs to be, you need to be giving that person, whoever picks whatever level, you need to give them more than their money's worth. They need to feel like, oh my God, I pledged this much money, but look how much stuff I'm getting for it. And that was the best advice I ever got. And the way to get around having to spend more than what the level is by basically just using the stuff for that level that you have around that you've already put the work into. Like for you guys, I'm sure, Doug and both of you, you've done a lot of work for indie stuff that you have probably like me, boxes in your house of copies of whatever, books of series that you did in the past. Well, all those things put together make great Kickstarter rewards. And it's all stuff that's already pretty much paid for.
Smart, and we definitely leaned into that.
That's perfect. Yeah. I mean, that was the best advice I ever got. And I share it with anybody else who's going to do Kickstarter.
How much did you guys end up raising on Kickstarter for this book?
Yeah, we did 20,000 in the first day, and after that I checked out. It's just like, okay, good. It's like I took off the uniform and sat on the bench and was just like, whoo, won that race.
Yeah, whatever you get on top of that is gravy. So you did your job.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely correct. One of the things that Doug, Kevin, and I always say is we want to over deliver. That's our mantra is over deliver. Always give more than what people expect, and especially since this is our kind of maiden voyage here, we want to do it right. I mean, that's one of the things that we were concerned about, making sure that the book was done before we even started the Kickstarter. That was an important thing for us.
That's really, really important and really smart, because not enough people do that.
Oh yeah,
right.
Well, in the past, I've been working on books that have been on the diamond schedule, and then my hand breaks. And it's just like, oh, okay. It doesn't matter how much I want to do the book, my hand is broken. So I'm going to be like a month and a half, 2 months out.
Yeah. But you guys definitely, I mean, you did it right, because that's the best thing, is showing people that they're not pledging to something maybe that you want to do in the future. you're showing them, hey, look, we got the work done here. We just need the money to get it finished. And this is what you're going to get. And people are seeing it. And they get excited about it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like I think when you're writing comics and when you're drawing comics, to a certain extent, it's very lonely work. You know, it's you're just alone in your studio, kind of getting it done, and the people behind Kickstarter, they really feel like, hey man, we want to pitch in, we want to help you, do this thing. So so it's a real different sort of attitude, and something that I really kind of enjoyed. I mean, Doug and I, this is one of Doug's great ideas, was we did a sort of podcast every week, or live cast through Instagram, and that was a lot of fun. It was
that is
really
a fantastic idea.
Yeah, so people could come and ask us questions, and the way that we treated it was, hey man, we oftentimes get together and just talk about whatever. Well, let's do that, and if somebody wants to join us, cool. And
Sure.
the room ended up kind of filling up, every week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you're on right now, is the same thing. We would just, we just talk to each other, and we're eventually like, maybe we should record some of this.
Yeah.
Cool.
But Brian, you use that as basically a loose kind of tool to promote the Kickstarter as it was going, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is a fantastic idea. And I kid you not, I am stealing that idea.
Oh, dude,
Yeah.
we did not copyright it. It's yours.
But I tell you what, that it's great that you guys are jumping on and doing Kickstarter now and really learning the tricks of the trade for it, because as anyone here, I think, will agree, it's already shaping up to be what I think the next big distribution model.
Mm-hmm.
And to not be a part of it, I think, is going to be a disservice to any indie creator. Whether you work for the big two or not, you're always going to be doing side projects, and I think that's going to be the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think you said the primary thing right there, because I think oftentimes with a retailer, especially if you're doing something that's kind of off canter, or if you're a new creator, or if you're a super independent creator, it's sort of, I mean, I totally empathize with a lot of retailers, where if you've got a choice of spending your money on a DC or a Marvel, book that is going to move out of the shop, or taking a chance on this independent that no one's ever heard of, with a storyline that's just completely off the beaten path, it's kind of hard to take that chance. And I appreciate the retailers that do run that risk, but at the same time, I think Kickstarter is an opportunity for those people to get themselves noticed. In a sense, play on the same playing field as some of the bigger creators that are coming to Kickstarter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned stories off the beaten path, and that you're talking to one of the retailers that probably sold the most copies of plastic of any retailer in the country. So we're definitely happy to get onto off that beaten path, I think.
Oh man, well plastic should have been sold with a machete knife, so that you could go as deep into the beaten, sort of unbeaten path as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, my store as well has a reputation for selling more kind of oddball, off the beaten path stuff as well. It has a history from the 70s and 80s as being a big place, a big retailer of underground comics back then. So we still have a reputation of that. We sell a lot of the big two, of course, but we have a lot of people coming in that are looking for oddball stuff. We have a lot of tourists, because we're in Santa Monica, that are coming in and looking for different type stuff. So that Kickstarter model really works well for us in our shop, because it gives us a chance to try some new things that I can look and see and think, wow, hey, this is going to appeal to my customers.
Yeah. Well, I totally appreciate you guys. You guys sound, and that's a tricky thing in comics, because I think there's comic book shops and then there's comic book retailers.
Yeah, sure.
And
absolutely.
I think,
we talk about that a lot, actually.
Oh, dude. And there's way too many times where a person walks into a comic book shop and they feel like an alien, because they're just not part of the shop. And the retailer is just, it's not really a retailer. It's just a shop. You come and you get your stuff and you leave. No one tries to sell you anything. No one is interested in what you're interested in. So you guys sound like you're doing it really the right way. And
Well, that was
retailing.
actually one of the inspirations for my store. Is there was a shop out here I had an experience with out in my area, where I went in looking for like horror comics, and the employee there literally said, "Oh, the weird stuff's over there," and just pointed that direction to me.
Oh man, I bet that made you feel welcomed.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of my inspirations when we designed our store, of how to design it, was just what you're talking about, making sure that whatever it is you're into, like, we obviously want people that are into superheroes to feel welcome as well, but not everybody is reading superhero, and frankly, a lot of people reading superhero like the other stuff too, especially once you've exposed them to it.
Yeah, I can kind of attest to the same experience as well, because I managed the shop with my wife. So we really took on, when we took over the shop 6 years ago, we really took on the mantra of comics are for everybody. And we really tried to get away from, the old guys club type of comic shop, the dungeon type comic shop.
Because oh, dude, nice.
Because before we took over the shop, my wife sometimes would go to a local shop in our area to find some, old issues of Amazing Spider-Man for me for my birthday or something like that. And every time she would tell me that she would go into these places and have a horrible experience and feel uncomfortable. And so when we took over the shop and she decided to manage it with me, we went in the complete opposite direction. And we went from a shop where literally girlfriends or wives would kind of very uncomfortably walk in the door looking to buy something for their husband or boyfriend, to having regular female customers. Our pull customers are probably equally,
nice.
Male and female. And whereas before when we took over, it wasn't. And we really cultivated that type of atmosphere. And we really think that all retail comic shops should be that way.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
It's not even just like female people coming. I mean, like anyone who doesn't know a lot about comics, if you go into one of those comic dungeon stores, there's like a 70% chance you're going to get laughed at by employers or customers. It's a bad feeling.
It is.
If you're that guy, it's a bad feeling. I mean, I've watched people literally come into a shop, interact with the employee for a minute or two, and then they're just gone, and they never come back.
See, now with our employees, we stress to our employees that if you know a lot about comics and people like that come in, you do not talk down to them or treat them less than. That's your opportunity to get them excited about the stuff that you know and the stuff that you think that they might like. And when that happens, I literally had an employee who's since left that would do that because he knew so much. He would get people excited about reading different things because he would ask them, "Oh, what movies do you like? What TV shows do you like?" And then he would say, "Really? Well, then you would totally love this." And then give him a little elevator pitch of what it's about. And then these people would literally come to the counter with about a dozen trade paperbacks. And they were just so excited about buying these things and reading them. So that's really what we should be doing with our extensive knowledge when these people come in.
I often say that we don't sell books, we sell community. Amazon sells books. So Doug, speaking of a plastic, I know that opened some unexpected doors for you. Talk about some of those experiences, some of the unique things that came about from such a unique book.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about plastic is when I pitched it to Daniel, I pitched Daniel several books, and that's the one he's like, I have to do this one. And I was like, you've obviously never met Daniel. He's the nicest Englishman who lives in Spain. And I was like, are you sure? Because dude, this is going to be a little bit disturbing. And he's like, no, this is the book. And so all along the way to getting it published, just about everybody told us we were crazy for doing it.
And you were.
And so when it came out and people responded to it, and luckily it resonated with somebody other than Daniel and I, it kind of it opened our eyes to hey, let's do comics like we want to do comics. And I think the biggest part there was just opening up these opportunities of people actually enjoyed this. When we started getting coverage from horror directors and horror actors and that kind of stuff, and people were really into it. It just opened up a lot of doors for us in ways we never suspected. And, I still wouldn't suspect.
You ended up at a porn convention too for that book, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. I got invited to the AVN, which is, the big one where they have the awards and stuff. One of the owners of a porn company liked the book, contacted me and said, I will fly you out if you'll sign plastic at my booth. And so flew me out there, put me up, the whole nine, like took great care of me. We're good friends even now, and dude, I mean, like, it was, I can't even put it into words how surreal that experience was, because I'd never been to anything like that.
How was the response among that crowd to comic books? I mean, how did you fit in there?
I don't mean
He was
this
a
to
hit
sound
at the
bad.
S&M booth.
Yeah, this is going to sound bad, but I don't mean it to. I had a better response there than I've had at any comic book convention. I had more people standing in line waiting to get my autograph in an hour than I ever had at a comic book convention.
That raises an interesting point, though, that sometimes you are better off marketing your book to an audience that aren't comic book readers, but are somewhat connected to the material than to actually market it to comic book readers.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. You're so right. You've got to branch out a little bit and try to go to even cons that are genre close to yours. And I mean, it's like horror cons, and maybe even try something like a book fair. Or
just be careful which book fair you bring that book to.
Exactly. I might end up in prison.
Yeah, don't go to the Scholastic or anything. That's not going to work well.
Well, the crazy thing about it is when you look at the books that are being published, just regular books, and when you look at the movies that are coming out, not all of them are superhero. It's just like you still have like every genre you can imagine. And I think it's weird that a lot of the main key publishers are locked into doing superhero comics, and that's it. So it's really up to the independents to kind of like carry the rest of the genres across the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree entirely.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say is as a comic book creator, you meet so many of the people that you're heroes of. And a thing that Doug and I will constantly say to ourselves, man, I wonder what 13-year-old Brian or 13-year-old Doug would think if I told them this.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me, what would 13-year-old Doug have said if he said, you're going to go to a porn convention?
What would 13-year-old Doug have said, Doug?
But he's got a lot of training to do. You got to get ready for that, man.
So, question for both of you guys. What is something about your job that kind of the average person would be surprised to learn, maybe like a misconception or something that they just don't think of about actually creating?
Well, for me, I think the wacky thing about it is that it's a job. I think what ends up happening is people oftentimes go to conventions and they see us like drawing and talking to people and doing all this stuff. And they're like, man, I'd like to be a comic book artist so I can do that. And that is 2% of what you do.
Sure.
They also don't realize that sometimes you have to do that even when you don't want to.
Oh yeah. So it's actually a job. I mean, you get up in the morning, you sit down, you work all day, as almost as if you're an accountant, just drawing pages, and then at night you should have shut things down and either sort of go home or watch some TV. So I think the thing that people would be surprised about is that this is an incredibly boring job. I mean, you do really exciting stuff, but it's just a day-to-day sort of boring job.
Yeah, makes sense. What about you, Doug?
When I talk to a lot of people, and I've had many jobs, so I understand where people are coming from. First off, Brian's right. Like, writing and creating is 10 times harder than any other job I've ever done, and I've done some really nasty jobs. I think Brian and I talk about this a lot too. Like, when you're creating and you get in the flow, any singularity that interrupts that flow almost destroys your entire day, so you can't work for the rest of the day. So you're working away and your friend calls and you talk for 15 minutes on the phone about the latest Mandalorian episode. Your creativity might be done for the day.
Yeah.
you know, and
I'm
I think
over here nodding my head furiously.
you know, it's like one of these and it's so frustrating because you're like, man, I was in the zone, and then my wife came in and asked me if I'd read the newspaper. You're like, not now, like, you know, you can't, and it's something that simple can throw you off, and it's not like a regular, like all the other jobs I've had where I'm like, you know, here I am, you know, shoveling snow or whatever, and you're like, hey, I'm going to talk to my friend for 50 minutes, and I'll go back to shoveling snow, and it's an easy transition. And with creativity, it's the exact opposite. It's like any small thing gets in the way of that flow for the day, and your day might be done. And then you're already behind, and then you get more stress. You know, it's like this crazy stress ball that goes with it too. It's an interesting life, that's for sure.
And then when you snap at the wife and she says, okay, fine. Well, maybe I won't talk to you all day. You're like, yes, exactly.
Thank you. Yeah. I think, and I think, you know, Doug can agree to this one also, is that when you have a creative job, no one has respect for that whatsoever. You know? And it's like, I would never call my buddy, you know, the garbage man while he's at work. You know,
Sure.
You know, but no one has any problem calling me anytime during the day. You know, it's just like there's just an assumption that I'm actually not working, and I know Doug kind of suffers the same thing. There's just and I mean that family doubles down on that. You know, they will just call you in the middle of the day and want to talk to you about something, and you have to say, "I'm at work." And they're like,
no,
well,
you're not. You're home drawing your little cartoons. Just let me talk to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and being self-employed is very much that way too. If you running your own retail store, I have times where I'm on shift, actively talking to customers. People are like, yeah, but I mean, you can do whatever you want. You're the boss. It's like, no, but I have a job still.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really fascinating about any kind of professional job that anyone just assumes they can do it. Whether you're a lawyer or like we were talking about this the other day. You wouldn't challenge Michael Jordan to a game of one-on-one and expect to win. But everyone thinks that they can go and become the professional artist. I saw a stat that 60% of Americans who watch medical dramas think they have medical expertise. Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Hopefully none of them run hospitals, and they're not hiring those people.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's fascinating to me that with profession, like there's just this lack of respect for any professional level person. There's this idea that anyone can just go and do it, and they don't see the 10,000 hours that it took you to perfect your craft to become that professional.
But Joe, I've been reading Batman all my life. I know how to write Batman.
Well, I mean, you're talking about me specifically. That's true. Yes, I could write great Batman.
Well, the other thing that I think is funny is the whole idea of, oh, when you were born, some like fairy anointed you with an oil which gave you talent.
Yeah.
You know, and
you're
it's
so
not like
lucky
you had
to be so good at this.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't require any actual work or anything like that.
No.
You just happen to have this talent, and a new like Amazon shipment of talent shows up every week.
I got a question for you that just popped in my head, Brian. As a working artist, like how much of getting your foot in that door is just dumb luck versus talent?
Well, I think and I've heard it attributed to, you know, sort of Michael Jordan, but like it's like that combination of preparedness and luck. You know, that's what you have to have. It's like, you know, like if you're kind of prepared and the opportunity happens, then you're good to go. I think with a lot of people, you know, you have like a lot of people online that do like a drawing every week and pine about, yeah, I'd love to do comics. And I always go, no, you know, your drawing that you're doing once a week isn't gonna cut it. You know, to do comics, it's actually like work. So I think there's dumb luck, but I think dumb luck only shows up if you have consistency. and that to me is the key thing as far as doing comics is concerned, is just being consistent, being able to consistently produce work, being able to consistently do good stuff, being able to just be consistent.
I spend a lot of time with publishers, and I think that I've heard that from literally every one of them, that they don't care how good your art is. If you can't deliver in the volume and in the time frame that they need, they don't care.
Oh yeah. And even the coolest thing is even if you're slow, like I'm slow, but I'm consistently slow.
Sure.
So it totally works out. You'll have a job if the editor isn't going to be surprised. Then it's like it's smooth sailing.
So for our show, we're based our whole idea and our concept around this show is kind of clearing up noise, letting people know how things work in the industry, not just on social media and from random people on Facebook.
Nice.
So with that in mind, I'd love to know what your guys' opinion and kind of what you see, or if you have any thoughts about the current state of the comic book industry right now.
Oh, dude, that's ours, man.
Yeah.
That is literally ours. Doug, why don't you take that one on while I calm down?
I think, obviously the pandemic is changing everything. And I've kind of seen it from a different point of view, I think, than a lot of other people, where I'm seeing a forced evolution of everything. And so how we do business, how we distribute comics, how comic shops survive during something like this is forcing all of us to change change our perspective on how we do things. And I mean, clearly there's some, we don't know what's going on with DC and where that's going to lead for sure. They're being pretty quiet about it. What I take comfort in is that I know everybody on this podcast, every retailer I've ever talked to, and every creator I've ever talked to, we love comics. And is comics going to go through a rough time? It already is. We've been through rough times before. We love our comics so much that we will make sure this industry survives it, just based on that, even if it doesn't make sense. Because a lot of times you got to admit, what we do doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not the smartest business to go into.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I think we will figure it out together. I don't know what it looks like because everything's so uncertain, but I do believe that, you've got 5 people right now on this podcast that I think no matter what, we're going to figure out a way to do comics and get them to people and get them into people's hands. We might not know what that looks like a year from now, but we'll figure it out.
Sure.
Because we love it.
Yeah, I'm on a different facet than that. I totally, absolutely, agree with that. But one of the things that just really gets me angry is good comics. That's the really freakish thing about it is if we produced good comics, everything would be fine. There just wouldn't be a problem. But I think too much is put on the marketing of comics rather than producing good comics. I think when creators are kind of left on their own or really messed with very little, and their only edict is do the best story you can, not necessarily do the best story you can, but you can't use these characters, and also you have to make sure that the lead character was once shot in the head. It's
Sure.
it's just it's impossible with all these restrictions of continuity and all these restrictions on storytelling and all these events that are going on. It is impossible to do a good story because you're not doing your story. You're only allowed one little piece of the big giant picture. And what's funny to me is there are several times when we get to the end of a big event, whether that's a big Marvel event or a big DC event, there's some buddies of mine that are hardcore Marvel goons, and I delight in asking them, so what happened? And they have no idea. They can't, and they read every issue of everything that came out. They spent $400 a week trying to get all the collected books and all that stuff, and they have no idea what the big event was about.
Sure. Oh, Brian, You have to go back and listen to me trying to explain to Eddie and Roger what Dark Knight's Metal was about a year after I had read it. It's hilarious.
Oh man, it is, and it's really weird, you know. And Cully Hamner said something that was that I thought was really interesting. He said that comics sometimes is only as interesting as Civil War reenactors. You know, if you're into Civil War battles and you're hanging around with your buddies, they're interesting. But most people are not, so they're not interesting. And I think the problem, especially with getting new readers in, is some of the stuff is so dense, and it's not really storytelling. It's just kind of history, kind of repeating itself over and over.
We actually, I think we had a nice debate about this topic on this podcast a couple weeks ago, and kind of saying some of the same stuff that you're saying right now.
We've had several. Imagine trying to be a retailer in that environment, Brian.
Oh, good God, man. And the weird thing about it is I put to you that good or quality or even great is not mysterious at all. Each of us can name 6 or 7 great books, you know, and each of us would probably agree that the books that the other one picked, yeah, that was a great book, you know. So great is not mysterious, but it's not really the thing that I think the industry in large is trying for.
Roger has a theory that's because they're risk adverse. Do you think that's the issue? Is just they're afraid to take the chance for greatness?
I think the problem is that, and I also think great sometimes takes a little longer and sometimes costs a little more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think those 3 things are kind of a problem.
Brian, I'm surprised you and I've never had this discussion, but like, I think you could argue that like that first year of Black Panther was borderline great in that somehow Marvel put out a book that resonated and clearly made it into a film. How was it, like, editorial wise? Did they leave you guys alone and let you just run, or
you just stole my question, Doug?
Oh, sorry, Joe.
I'm looking at it right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, here's the funniest thing about that. Okay, the funniest thing about that is I think everyone involved in the project was white, and Ta-Nehisi and I were the black guys. And there was like a certain bit of, yeah, whatever you guys want, man. You know, that really allowed us to just kind of do stuff, you know. And you know, I've worked with Marvel like a bunch of times before, but I would call them up and I'd say, hey, you know what, Wakanda, I'm changing that. I don't like the fact that Wakanda has always been drawn as a bunch of huts. I think that's insulting. And they'd go, yeah, man, whatever you want, man. Go for it, dude. You know, so it was like really kind of cool that we were just completely left alone, and even doing things like Ta-Nehisi and I got together, and he said, dude, I don't know the tech. What do you think about the tech? And I was just like, I'll send you something. So I wrote up this thing about the technology of Wakanda and sent it to him, and then I thought, you know, maybe I should send this to the editors too. You know? But they just let us do whatever we want, and not only that, but they allowed me to work on my own schedule. Like they originally contacted me and said, yeah, we want you to do the first 12 issues, and I immediately said, I got 4. You know, if you want the book at this rate, you're going to get 4 from me. And they were like, okay. You know, so like it worked out perfect, because and I think a large percentage of that was they were willing to wait on it, and they trusted the creators. You know, and
I think
that's
you're
important.
I think you're onto something with that too, because I think you've seen, and you know, when we go to meetings with Diamond and stuff, we'll see numbers, and obviously it's still very Big Two driven, but in the last 5 years or so, you've got a lot of companies like, you know, Boom and Image and Aftershock that are really building a lot more than they used to, and I feel like the creator owned and kind of the the concept where a creator does what they want to do and the publisher publishes the book, where the publisher isn't the creator. And those companies that operate that way, they seem to be really resonating more and getting a lot more market share than they used to. It's a slow growth, but I really feel like a lot of things are going that direction.
Oh yeah, the cool thing is like Doug and I, man, we abuse Kevin, our publisher. I mean, it's so much fun working with him because oftentimes we'll just show him stuff when we're done with it. A lot of times when I'm doing a cover, I'll send in the cover and say, yeah, here's the cover. Not here's the sketch. What do you think? So we're really allowed, and what ends up happening is Doug ends up being my editor for the art, and I end up being Doug's editor for the story. So it's like a real cool kind of back and forth, and Doug can just slam on me, and I know where it's coming from. I know, oh man, Doug is going to be the first gate of quality control, so I'm going to make sure that if Doug has a problem with something, if something's confusing to Doug, I need to address that, and Doug knows that I'm going to do the same for him. So it's really, I think every occasion in comics when the publisher has left the creators relatively alone or given them sort of as much rope as they need, it's been great stuff, and not just independent stuff, but Marvel stuff, DC comic stuff, and great is not mysterious.
Yeah, I like that.
Going back to Black Panther just briefly, I mean, you guys, your Black Panther run started 2016, right? So right as Civil War was coming out. That was really the most important time for that character to be in the zeitgeist since he came out in the 60s, I would say, since Kirby was done with him. Did you feel any like editorial pressure, or like you didn't have like Kevin Feige calling you up to yell at you after the movies started dropping?
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about it is when we started working on it, it wasn't important. I mean, they hadn't published Black Panther in a while, and he was kind of a second, third tier character that was always cool. So it was like when we got when I got tapped to do it, my first thought was, oh well, man, I love Black Panther. I think it would be cool to do Black Panther, but again, I don't want to do something stupid. So the first thing I said was, well, who's writing it? And they were like, well, we can't tell you. And I'm like, find somebody else. Click. Because again, if I'm going to go off on this tirade about bad books, I can't be guilty. So so they wouldn't tell me who was writing it for the longest time. And when they finally kind of did the, okay, we'll send you the script to the first issue, and they blotted out all of sort of Ta-Nehisi's name on everything, I was just like, okay, well, let me just read it. And I read the script and I was blown away. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the real deal. Yeah, I'd like to be in on this. So it was kind of not that important. I thought it was going to be cool, but like we were kind of working in a biosphere, just producing pages, kind of having a good time, no big deal. And the thing that blew me away was getting a phone call from my mom, who doesn't give a crap about comics. and she said, so I hear you're doing this Black Panther thing. And I was just like, no. 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 We're not going to even have this conversation. Because she doesn't know who Black Panther is, and she'd read an article in the New York Times. So I was just like, oh wow, I guess this is a big deal. So it was only then that it became, oh wow, you're working on something important. So it was kind of and I think we had already developed that working relationship with Will Moss and Marvel, that they just kind of went, oh, those guys are over there doing their Black Panther thing, so just leave them alone.
So was there any change in like your approach or the way that you felt about the project once you kind of realized it was a big deal, or did it still feel pretty similar internally?
No, I get myself locked in creatively on a project, and I don't want to sound too much like a hippie or anything like that, but there's a certain kind of energy that you get from a project, and once you're there, you're like, okay, this is what the project wants, and you just kind of ride that out. And I was already in that place with Black Panther. So what's really cool is by the time I started seriously doing conventions, I was well into my 4 issues. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I'm looking back at it now.
I just want to say, Rise of the Black Panther. Those 5 covers are genius work, man. They're
Dude,
amazing.
appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
I picked number
Mhm.
1. I picked Rise number 1 as my cover of the year in 2018 in the CGC or CBC.
Yeah, I want them all as prints.
I just want the OA.
That too.
Well,
but
the cool thing about that is every time I take on a cover assignment, especially if it's a multiple issue cover assignment, what I try to do is not do one cover and then do another cover and then do another. I want a theme that when you look at all of them together, it makes sense. It has a certain
and
feeling
those have a
to it.
beautiful flow to them.
Yeah, and again, that was kind of a situation where the editor, I just kind of went to him and I said, "Hey, man, I got a plan for these," and he was just like, "Okay, go for it, man." And I turned in the first 2 issues, and I was just like, "Okay, they're going to be silhouettes. All of these are going to be silhouettes," and it just really sort of sang. I was just happy that I didn't get messed with or anything like that, and they really kind of allowed those to develop. And the second coolest thing is I'm hanging out in New York at the show, and Ta-Nehisi comes by the table, and he says, "All right, dude, Rise number 1. If there's original art, I gotta have it." so he just grabbed the original for that and ran off with it.
He's a smart man. Smart man.
This actually, sorry to interrupt. This actually brings up an interesting point that I wanted to ask you, Brian. Are you traditional or digital when you do your art? Or you do both?
I am. Yeah, I do both. But when I'm doing a comic book, I am doing it digitally, and there's the main reason for that is, and this is gonna sound weird, is I don't want it to be art. I want it to be story. And if I'm working on a piece of paper, I have a tendency to want it to be art, and that's just not a good thing. That just really kind of gets in the way of things, because I'm more concerned about making it pretty than I'm concerned about like really telling the story. But when I'm doing it digitally, there is no aftermarket. There's nothing. Once I'm done with this, it's gone. So I like having that attitude towards the work.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a really good point. One that I haven't heard from any other artist.
Yeah, me either.
That you're using the tool that best serves what you are doing at the moment, rather than the commerce of it, meaning that you can sell this artwork afterwards. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think especially like the thing that got me started on it was I was doing an Oracle story, and the first page of the Oracle story was Batman coming into her hospital room, after she'd been shot, and my thought was, man, Batman, oh yeah, I'm gonna go crazy here. But then I realized if you do a story with Batman in it, it's a Batman story. So it actually makes more sense to back off on the Batman and make the story about Oracle. So that really kind of set off a light in my brain that basically said, there's a difference between story and art, and you should be doing art when you're doing the interiors of these books.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really interesting. I would not have thought of that.
No, that's a phenomenal insight, and any aspiring artist listening should definitely take a note on that one, because
I agree. Yeah,
whatever tool you have to serve your story the best is what you should use.
Yeah. Now, when I'm doing commissions and when I'm doing like covers, sometimes it's just like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I
covers
want you to
make
look at
sense.
me. Yeah, I want you to look at me. This is all about like stopping the reader in their tracks. I don't want you to look at anything else. I want this to be all about that art.
So, Doug, I got a question for you now.
Uh-oh.
No, this one's an easy one. So with your writing, it spans a lot of subjects and varieties. I mean, you have a lot of high octane action. You got serial killers with blow up dolls for wives. How do you pick your projects that you decide to pursue? And kind of what do you ever really leave any behind when you put them on the scrap heap, or are they just kind of always there waiting for the right time?
Well, I mean, a lot of times it's like when I was talking with Daniel and Brian and I work in the same way too. Like we'll throw around a couple of ideas, and I usually leave it up to the artist that I'm working with to pick the one they want to work on. So honestly, it kind of falls on the artist on which things I'm going to work on next.
Okay.
But they're always there. They're always waiting on me. And so, of course, I've got at least 20 stories that I'm ready to work on at any given point. But I can obviously only do so many, and so can artists. So like it's I let them pick, and those are the ones I focus on until I'm done, and then hopefully we move on to the next one. Now the problem is, of course, new ideas come along, and
Sure.
so that the backlog keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you're like, man, I really want to get back to this one way back when, but who knows when it's ever going to come back around. And honestly, I mean, dude, like you said, I don't consider myself I don't focus on one genre. It's like the stories come to me, and I kind of like a large selection of genres myself, and I want to play in all of them. So it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm an action guy. I mean, I love action, but at the same time, like I want to write Seven Psychopaths, and I want to do Star Wars, and I want to do X-Men, and I want to do, a rom-com, and it's all over the place.
Sure. Yeah, dude. I'm gonna have you pitch me a Star Wars story next time. If you do that with Charles, you'll get him nerding out. Like Charles is the biggest Star Wars nerd I've ever met. You and Charles need to have this conversation.
Well, something else Doug and I talked about, which I thought was kind of interesting, is oftentimes in the creative process, the story or the idea doesn't get delivered to you. You get it in installments. You'll get like, because I remember Doug telling me with plastic, is that there was just this, and I think it was almost from a road sign that you misread or something like that.
Yep.
Where it was just like this fragment of an idea, and it's just like, okay, that's weird, but then the rest of it shows up, so it is there are those back burner ideas that are like it's like some like sort of Gundam machine or something like that, that's just okay, well that idea is missing a leg, and as soon as that leg shows up, then I'll be able to write that, or I'll be able to get that one going.
That's so frustrating too when it's missing a leg and you can't think of it. And the next thing you know, you're riding down the street and you see KFC and you're like, that's it. Chicken, exact leg I needed for this story, and you're like, what? And it's just that whole process sometimes can be so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, even with Thomas River, it's just like, I woke up one morning and I had a scene, which was I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but there's a presidential speech in the book, and I had that scene, and I was just like, oh, I got this scene, and I told it to Doug, and Doug was just like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But it wasn't really, there was nothing attached to it, so it was like this cool scene that was completely out of context, and we had to wait for the arms and the legs to kind of show up, until we got it all put together.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
That actually leads into one of our next questions. Can you talk about working on your own IP versus other characters, like the similarities and difference and what you prefer?
Oh man, well, for me, there's something great about both. I mean, I'm a fanboy, plain and simple. I'm a huge fanboy. I'm a Batman fanboy, a Flash fanboy, Spider-Man, just way too many characters. So getting an opportunity to work on those characters, it's just like, I don't even have to think about it. I don't have to create. It's like just jumping on a bucking bronco and just riding it for as long as I possibly can. And there's something just really satisfying about doing it. But I think when you do your own stuff, when you're creating something from whole cloth, it's a whole different kind of satisfaction. It's I mean, these are your kids, so it has like a different, but I think a more personal touch to it.
And I know with me, like initially in my career, it was tougher for me to work on pre-created, like Batman and those kind of characters, because I knew the history and you didn't want to mess it up. So then when I got more into creator owned, I realized like I want to write my stories. Like I want it to be I want it to be good enough for me to read. And so looking back, I wish I'd have had that perspective when I was writing those characters, going, I should write my version of Batman, not their version of Batman. Not the version of Batman maybe readers want to see, but the version Doug wants to read. And so I think I would be better at writing pre-existing characters now than I was, say, 5 or 6 years ago. But I mean, yeah, like Brian said, I mean, there's such a, when you're writing Batman, you got to kind of fan out a little bit because, I mean, I grew up on Batman. And then when you're writing your own characters, there's this like satisfaction when it resonates with other people and they're like, oh, I like this story, but they're not liking the fact that you wrote Batman. They're liking the fact that you created something new. Go ahead.
Is there more like pressure or like insecurity involved with rejection of one or the other? Like do you feel more like you let people down with a character they already love, or more kind of, is it worse when they kind of don't resonate with something you created?
That's a good question. Because here's the deal.
I'm good at those, man. That's my specialty.
I think here's the difference. The difference is if you let them down on Batman, 100,000 people read Batman, and they're going to let you know that you let them down. If you let them down on your comic book, it's completely self-created. Nobody's read it, so nobody cares.
Okay.
You just don't make any money.
Doug, you could go on to cure cancer and people will say, yeah, but do you remember that Batman story you wrote?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
it's like, yeah, cancer, but, his Batman sucks. Well, I tell you, there's a weird pressure, and I think I chicken out like as often as I can. When you get asked to do Batman, there is a history of great artists that have done much better work than you on the character. So there is like this weird kind of unspoken kind of pressure that's on you. And I think one thing that's really unique to the comic book industry, and it's one of the things that I love about the comic book industry, is you do your own Batman. You don't just do generic Batman. You have your Batman that you're putting out there. And what's really cool about that is there's some pressure there too, where it's just like, well, I want to create a Batman that's unique. I don't want to do Neil Adams's Batman or, sort of J. Scott Campbell's Batman. I got to figure out my own Batman, and I got to figure out my own Spider-Man and my own unique Green Lantern and all these other characters. So that does put like a weird pressure on you. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of times when I get asked to do something, like Lisa Hawkins, she's one of the great editors at Marvel. Now she's working at Valiant. But what's really awesome is she came to me and said, you can do any Marvel character or any X-Men character that you want for this short story. Just pick a character. You can do Wolverine. You can just do anything. And I was just like, okay, give me Cyclops. And she was just like, what? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do the best Wolverine story. That's been done. But I do have an opportunity to do the best Cyclops story. So I pick Cyclops. Just takes all the pressure off the table. So sure, a lot of times, a lot of times what I do is I go, give me the lame character. I'll take that one.
You're preaching to the choir here. I believe I was quoted as saying once on the show, I don't like GSX because who would want a book with 2 Cyclopses on the cover?
So I think we got one more for you guys, and then we'll let you go back to your lives. So this one's for both of you. Just like to know kind of who is someone in comics at any level that you've worked with or that you haven't, but that someone that you feel is undervalued for their influence on the industry or the art form or what they bring to the table.
Wow.
Wow, man, that's actually a great one. Because there's so many of these people. And I think the way that I work a lot of times is if there's somebody that I like, I really don't care, what their status is in the industry. Hey, I like their stuff, and I'll oftentimes kind of like want to hang out with them or want to work with them on different projects. So I think that's a fantastic question there. But man, that question's so good it like blew everyone out of my head. Yeah, Doug, you got anyone for that?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think, you know, this is going to sound like me just taking care of my friends, but like, I think you have to look at that original Gaijin crew, and you can't deny the fact that Dave Johnson, Cully Hamner, Adam Hughes, Brian Stelfreeze, Jason Pearson have had a monster impact on comics even to this day. Like, there are people who you can look at their work and go, oh yeah, you can see Jason Pearson. Oh yeah, you can see Cully Hamner in their work. And, luckily I was friends with all those guys from a young age, but like, there's no doubt that all of those people had a huge impact on what comics even look like to this day. And I mean, obviously everybody knows who Adam Hughes is, but like, look at the people who have kind of like, you can see the influences on them, like say a Stuart Eminem at one point.
Sure. Yeah.
Like these huge impacts of these people that like have clearly made decades of impacts, like from the 80s on to today. And their artwork and their storytelling still is seen in new comic book artists to this day.
Yeah, no, I can see exactly what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, that was an awesome class to be kind of a part of, and it's kind of weird because as Doug was talking about it, it's like my first thought is kind of the class before us, which was guys like Howard Chaykin and Walt Simonson, and even John Byrne. I mean, for me, the coolest thing in the world was being a huge just fan. And if I was more talented, I would have just totally ripped off Walt Simonson's Thor stuff. And just being a fan of his work, but then meeting him, and then eventually, like we worked together on Wednesday's Comics. That was just the biggest moment for me, because like actually getting a chance to do some art on a Walt Simonson story was just like, I'm like, okay, cool. You can kind of take me out right now. This is as good as I need.
So have you been able to have you done much work with Walt directly at all?
No, it was just that Catwoman Demon story that we did for Wednesday's Comics. That was pretty much sort of where we met. But it was kind of a cool thing, because like from that was the first time that Walt and I worked together. But we'd been kind of circling for a while, and he's sort of become my comics dad.
Sure.
It's just like he's just a good guy to go to and just kind of talk to. And Walt is one of those guys where his career, his art, and his personality are like perfect things for every comic book artist, aspiring comic book artist, to model themselves after.
Yeah, I've had the chance to meet Walt only once, but he was one of those guys. There's certain guys when you go through and you can tell they're just there to do their jobs, and there's certain guys when you see them at a con, you can tell they're really enjoying themselves. And he was definitely in the enjoying themselves category. He just seems to really enjoy interacting with people.
Oh yeah, and he's still doing it, well.
Yeah, yeah.
So that just blows my mind. But yeah, I mean, he's like one of the few guys that I can think of, and I think just about everyone else that has had like a huge influence on me. I mean, guys like Jim Steranko, and Kirby, they're so like well known. They're so just household names as far as the comic book industry is concerned. But quite frankly, I think the neat thing about it is there's a lot of women in comics that I'd love to kind of get a chance to work with. I worked with Devin early on with Matador, I've always kind of wanted to do some stuff with Gail Simone and some of the other folks.
Sorry, just so we get the last name, Devin.
Grayson.
Thank you. And I look forward to picking up and reading Thomas River. Is it out already?
Nope, it's at the printer. I think today.
Okay, so when
it's the PDF is out.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to kind of go into the backer kit and grab a hold of it, they can sort of get the PDF relatively quickly.
Okay, and when does the floppy hit shops?
I think that's going to be in late December or early January.
Okay, awesome.
And are you guys getting wide distribution into comic shops on that? Like, can they set a hold through Diamond, or is this one going to have to be comic shops going to have to go through you guys to get a hold of this one?
I think for this one, they're going to have to go through us.
Okay. And what's the best place? What's the best place for someone listening if they want to check it out and they couldn't get on Kickstarter? Where's the best place for them to buy this?
That would be backer kit or through Indiegogo.
Fantastic. Okay, well, if anyone that listens to this that's at our store, I guarantee you we will have them at Nerd Store, because anything Doug produces, we put on the shelf. So we will have them.
I will pledge to do the same.
Doug just so I can get in the shop.
And hopefully when things clear up, hopefully I can get you down to California as well, Doug.
Oh yeah, that's a piece of cake. I love California, so consider it done.
And this is sort of past the podcast if you guys want to, but like as a comic book creator, you guys run shops. What do you guys think? I mean, what do you guys think of the direction things are moving in, and if you had your druthers, would you push it? Would you push some of the creators in a specific direction? I mean, like, the funny thing about it is as far as like retail, as far as the direct market is concerned, I generally don't get a chance to talk to the fans on the level that you guys do. So, I mean, what's your take on things?
Well, that's what this podcast is about. So we have about 20 episodes on that, but
so that's about 20 hours worth of opinion as well.
So far. One thing, if I was to say anything kind of about what you just said, one of the things that the message I give to a lot of publishers and stuff when we're at Comics Pro and I'm talking to them is, we need to stop looking at our customer base as the customers we have and start looking at our customer base as how do we get the customers we don't have. I think there's too much of people catering to the comic customer, which is fine. We need to keep comic customers. I'm not saying we should just abandon the people, our core base or whatever, but there's so much content that you can easily create a good amount of content that's going to make your regular comic customers happy. But we need to start making not only content, but also marketing decisions and advertising decisions that's based around getting people that are not identified themselves as comic readers into comics. Like the conversation we had with Doug about the AVN convention when he said it was such a great turnout. Those are not that is not a place a comic company would typically think to advertise. Yet look how
Roger,
it does.
It's called hentai.
And well, that's a little different. but actually, no. It's pre-pandemic. We had a plan. I was gonna set up a booth at a reptile convention and sell dinosaur-themed comic books, and just see how it went. And just thinking outside the lines those ways. Going to a gun convention and selling action books. Those are the kind of things I think we need to start doing. And I've tried to talk to retailers to try and get some of them on board doing some more of this, because I think on the ground level we can do a lot of that. But I would love to see publishers really start to take that mentality as well and really start to go into those channels, because we've already got everyone who reads Bleeding Cool that's going to come to comics. You know what I mean? We need to not spend all our advertising there and start thinking about other things.
Well, that's one of the things that I really love about Free Comic Book Day, because that seems like such a great opportunity
It is. But what I'm sure Roger will agree, you get a ton of people that come in for the free comic books that you've never seen before, and they might even buy some other stuff, but you don't see those people again until the following year. So
a little percentage. I mean, it still helps, and there are definitely still. I mean, I got into comics because of a free comic book day book. I mean, I'm very late. I'm a late comer to comics. I didn't read my first comic till I was in my late 20s. This was not my path to this type of thing. This was my brother, and I went along with him. You know what I mean? So comics was never my thing. And it was because I associated comics with superheroes. And I was like, well, I got enough superheroes with movies and cartoons. I don't need more. And then there was a free comic day issue by Christos Gage of Absolution, which is and my brother handed me that issue, and we're on a trip together, and he goes, hey man, just read this. And so on that trip, I read that. I read Crossed, and I read The Killing Joke. And I went, oh, wow, okay, now I understand why I need comics in my life, because they're not what I thought they were.
You out, man.
What's that?
Yeah.
Your brother took you out, man. It was like, here, try this thing. It's called crap.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. And he knows my taste well enough to know exactly what would work, too. So
yeah. But there are so many people that are on the fence, and if you just give them that little bit of push, you can turn them into comic book readers, because we've talked about this a lot on the show. We definitely want to see publishers, retailers in the industry not just market to the people that they already have. We want to market to the people that aren't stepping into the shop, because my wife and I, when we took over the shop, the biggest frustration that we had, and we still have to this day, is you get millions and millions and millions of people to go see the new Avengers movie or Black Panther. But how many of those people are actually funneling into a comic book shop and picking up a comic? Very few, if any at all. There's been so many times where my wife and I are at a get together or an event, and we meet people and they ask us, this is obviously pre-COVID, they ask us, what do you do? And we tell them, oh, we own a comic book shop. And they say, oh, really? I just saw the new Iron Man movie. I totally loved it. And we say, oh, do you read comics? No, I don't read comics. And
they just instant dismissal.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah,
instant dismissal. How do you turn those people around?
I think, you guys have had some good ideas putting books in places that they traditionally used to be, like convenience stores or impulse buys at the supermarket, and then also in places where they non-traditionally used to be. Put a rack of comics in the movie theater. Put like some Avengers and some Black Widow and some Iron Man up there.
I don't get on with that as much as honestly, because I think that right now people already if you're into superheroes and you want to read superheroes, you don't have a question about where you go. You already know you go to comics.
Yeah.
The people who don't know that they need comics are the people that read horror, or the people that read fantasy, or the people that read, those types of things. Those are the people who don't know that there's things out there in comics for them. So I'm not opposed to that necessarily, but I don't think we see great gains in superhero. I think superheroes capped out. I think what we have reading superhero is who is going to read superhero, and I think that's okay. It's already a pretty good base, but we could have a whole lot more people reading a whole lot of other things.
Yes,
if we just understand that.
The superhero crowd seems to recycle themselves pretty regularly too. So, it's like.
But we don't seem to be gaining on them.
Well, and part of the problem does come to what you talked about, Brian, with making it more accessible, because a lot of the superhero stuff just gets so bogged down. And I mean, like I said, I got into comics in my late 20s, and when I worked at a comic shop, I went, well, I guess I got to read Marvel now. And I felt like it was a 2 or 3 month learning curve just to understand how and what orders to read Marvel books, let alone to get any satisfaction out of the stories, where it was so daunting to get into it.
And that's where we disagree on this show, because that's like part of what I love is the complexity, and I love all the variables and factors, and this leads into this and this bleeds into that, but I understand that it creates a high bar of entry. There needs to be a better jumping off point than just having a crisis every 5 years and restarting the story with the same canon. There's got to be an easier way to jump off.
But to Roger's point,
it's sort of you sort of remind me of there's a bunch of friends of mine that they always say, dude, you got to watch Breaking Bad. And I'm like, I don't have the time. I just don't have.
Exactly.
I can't just dedicate like 3 years of my life to that.
And it's the same with comics.
Sure it's great,
you can
but
give,
I can't do it.
Yeah, it is the same with comics. You can give a book to a person who can be a new reader and say, no, you just have to read this one book. It's the story is just all in here. And I firmly believe you can get more rabid readers to comics by giving them a copy of March or Mouse or Facts from Sarajevo or a book like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not anything that heavy. I just happened to actually just finish reading Facts from Sarajevo for the first time the other day, so it's just on my mind. But it's a complete story. It's not superhero. It's something that I think is a very human story, and you can get people in through that way.
No,
Yeah.
I think we all agree on that. I think where we're at, where Roger and I disagree is, I just don't think you throw baby out with the bathwater by ditching 80 years of history.
Well, frankly, I don't care. But to be honest with you, if I was guiding the industry right now, I would completely ignore superhero. I would say you guys do what you want to do, and I would get the rest of the industry united on the idea of advertising the other to everybody else. I wouldn't even care about superhero because I think that it's, even with that barrier of entry, even if that was solved, I don't think the gains there are nearly what the gains you'd get in the other categories. I think the other categories is where the gains are just sitting there waiting for someone to grab them.
And I agree, because how many people realize that a movie like Ghost World or Road to Perdition or
See
whatever,
what you did, Brian?
that those
See
are
what you did?
no one
asked for this.
Most people don't realize that those movies are based on comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think something that's interesting is there are friends of mine, a lot of friends of mine, who will watch the Marvel movies and enjoy the Marvel movies and think that they're the best thing ever and watch them several times over, but they don't read any comics.
Exactly. I know many people like that.
I think
exactly.
I think to a certain extent, the comics did the movies did the thing that I think the comics should do, which is it sort of didn't completely rely on all that history, but it sort of at points acknowledged that it was there.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It paid tribute for sure.
And I think the comics, like you know, Doug and I did like a reading group, and at one point in this one comic, the comic led up to this shadowy figure turning around, and you saw that it was Ra's al Ghul. And most of the people in the reading group didn't know who Ra's al Ghul was, so the point of the comic was completely missed.
Yeah.
So most of the people that were new readers had an unsatisfying experience because they're like, well, who the hell is that? Whereas, you know, the goons were just like, it's Ra's al Ghul, man.
Yeah.
Come on, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the movies don't make that mistake. The movies actually present things in a way where, like you said, you get both of you guys like chocolate and peanut butter. You know, you get like the history, but you also get like something that you don't have to know the history.
Yeah.
And I think another movie that did a fantastic job of that was Deadpool.
Yes.
I mean, it was like so awesome sitting in the theater, and the crowd would laugh at certain things, but then the hardcore comic nuts would laugh at other
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Deadpool
I thought that
nails
was
the fan
so
service.
amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another one is
but
Logan.
It was fan service, but not fan required
Yes.
service.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
I fully agree.
And
Fully agree.
I think Logan also does just a fantastic job of paying tribute to the source material, where you can see it in the DNA of the movie, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
You can sit down. You don't have to watch any X-Men movies, and you can sit down, and Logan's fantastic.
Well, both Logan and Deadpool
Yeah.
could be great movies if they didn't have superheroes in them. They're great movies and great stories that happen to have superheroes in them, and I think that's the common thread. Where so many comics are just a comic of superheroes. Without a superhero, they wouldn't work at all for the level they do work. And I think that's the important part: is we need to have people that are writing stories and creating stories that would work without the superheroes, and then heightened by the fact that they're there.
That's the difference. That's the difference between stories and soap opera.
Sure.
You know, when it's soap opera, it's just really about the drama
Yeah.
of these characters,
Mhm.
and you know, who they are as individuals doesn't even matter. What the story is about doesn't even matter. It's just, this endless kind of like family drama that the characters get into. So yeah, I think we've solved it, guys.
Now we just need to get the right people to listen.
We've saved the industry.
Yeah. Just when this podcast goes up, it's done.
Yeah. So
get ready to count the money.
Doug, Brian, this is what our podcast literally devolves into, is us arguing about the industry and how to save it and what needs to be done, and us shouting over each other. So
it's a good time.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's like, if you could like add in like some like overused couches, it would basically feel like my old comic book.
There you go. That's what
we're going for.
I am usually drinking a nice beer while we do the show, so I tend to get a little verbose by the end of it.
Well, guys, I love doing this. This is so much fun to rap with you guys. So definitely, like, have me back anytime.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for coming on. Hopefully when the world goes back to the normal, we'll get a chance to meet you in person at some point.
Yeah,
Yes.
You should definitely
totally
tag along with Doug to Wasatch.
Yeah, well, Doug's been trying to get me up there for a while, and I was planning on like getting out there maybe possibly this year before the end time.
I can't recommend it enough, Brian. What I will say about Roger and his show is that he literally takes care of all his guests above and beyond. You may not know, but I'm also, besides being a comic shop owner, I'm also a comic creator. I do a comic strip called Collectors, which is like loosely based on myself and my wife and my comic book collecting and all the nerdy stuff she puts up with.
Sweet.
And
very nice.
Yeah, so it's done like a Sunday style newspaper comic strip. But regardless, what I was trying to say is that Roger's had me as a guest at his show. Is it twice now? I forget.
Yeah, twice.
And even though there were bigger names there than me, I was taken care of just as well as any of them. I mean, green room, rides to and from the show, the most well taken care of I've ever been at any show. So I can't recommend enough that you come out there.
Yeah, all right, man. Well, I'm sneaking out there, man.
That'd be awesome.
Was that good, Roger? You can PayPal the $20 to me.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
It's getting to a point where if someone like sort of decided to put on a comic book shop at the Shell gas station near my place, I would jump on it.
Yeah, you and me both. This year has really showed me how much of my social life revolves around Comic-Cons.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, man. It's awesome, and it's...
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap things up for us this week. Thank you for taking a peek behind the counter. And thank you, Doug. Brian, please come back whenever you want. Just hit us up. You are more than welcome. And that's going to do it for this week. We will see you soon.
All right. Thanks again, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. You guys take it easy.
Thank you.
This show is part of the Geek Nerd Network. Find more shows like it at geeknerdnetwork.com. This is Janet.
What is fandom?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Fandom is your obsession with TV, movies, comics, and books.
Fandom is debating whether or not Goku or Superman would win in a fight. Clearly, it's Batman.
Fandom is about liking things. Join us weekly on Fandom as we talk about all of that and more. Subscribe at fandompodcast.com.